Hello, nature lovers. I bet you're sitting here looking at your computer going, what a lovely map. What does it represent? Well, some of you little brighter ones might have figured out that it represents the biomes of the world. Biome? What the heck's a biome, Eps? Let me tell you. According to our friends at the International Baccalaureate headquarters, a biome is a collection of ecosystems sharing similar climatic conditions. For example, tundra, tropical rainforest, and desert. Just kidding, desert. Okay, so what the heck's all that mean? Well, when we talk about ecosystems, we talked about that in class, and we know that that's a combination of biotic and abiotic factors, and how those factors kind of weave together is what forms an ecosystem. Okay, what they're really talking about is they're talking about these ecosystems sharing similar climatic conditions. So that would be temperature, amount of precipitation, hours of daylight, different factors like that, which pretty much fall in the abiotic factor or realm. All right, you have this. Okay, if you don't, pause because I'm moving on. All right, here we go. So let's look at our map here because there's kind of some cool things. If you look at these colors, I don't know if you notice, but like purple goes across the top here. It also hits here and it hits here, and we're going to talk about it in just a second. But purple hits across the top. Green, look, it's in kind of a line. Okay, dark green, another line. Now there's some differences, of course. There's this sort of kind of brown or tan here and tan here, but again, look, they're right in line. So in this line, you've got this mix of kind of this pale blue, this tan, and this green. They're all, and then over here, green, tan, pale blue. Again, right there. Darker brown, darker brown. See how they're all in lines? You don't see that much darker brown up here, if any. You don't see any green down here, bright green. You see these kind of different things. They're almost stripes across the earth. And those stripes correspond with latitudes. Okay? And those latitudes carry with them certain climatic conditions. So, for example, if I draw the equator here, which is, I think it's right about, plus or minus, I think it's right about here. Well, that's a weak ecosystem, but that's okay. So if here's our ecosystem, on either side, we expect that to be a certain way. And in fact, it is. And interestingly enough, right along this equator, just above it here, you get a lot of your deserts. Okay? How do I know that? Because I have a key. See? It's right there. There's my key. So let's look at this. Let's see if I can make that just a smidge bigger for you. Okay, good. So here I've got, let's look like what's right on the equator. Well, we've got rainforest right on the equator. Right there, we've got Indonesia and so forth, right on the equator. Bright yellow, savanna. That's where all the lions and tigers and hang out. There's the tigers. There's the lions. Really no bears. Just forget that. Might be a bear or two here, some sort of funky Amazonian bear. Down here, there's that. But anyway, this is right here along the equator, and you got a lot of desert right here along the equator. Okay, because it's hot, and not a lot of rain. But which is funny because if you think about it from a meteorological, is that a word? Meteorological standpoint, weather standpoint, basically what happens here is air is pushed from up here down to here. No, other way around, sorry. Comes down here because it's cold here. Comes down here, picks up moisture, pushed up to the atmosphere till it cools, condenses, and rains. So you kind of wonder, why is there so much dryness right here? Long story, I'm not even sure I know off the top of my head, but if you notice, savanna's right here, and really probably this is down here. It's probably a craptastic line, so see if I can move it down just a little. Nope, I can move the whole thing up though. Look at that. That's probably a better representation of the equator. So you get some pretty lush stuff here. You get the chaparral is a kind of a type of forest. You get grassland, you get savanna here. Has rainy seasons, but it's not rainy all the time. Here you got the rainforest right across the equator. Here, right across the equator. Lots of rain, so kind of what I described does happen. I kind of digress, of course. I know that surprises everybody, but basically what I'm trying to show you is that the weather patterns around the world really do dictate where these ecosystems show up around the world. That's really what I'm trying to show you. And you can see that by a certain latitude, we expect certain weather conditions there. And those certain weather conditions create these certain ecosystems. Well, when you combine the like ecosystems, so let's say this, we got the boreal or taiga forest right there and right there. They're not all one giant ecosystem. Here's an ecosystem, over here's a different ecosystem, down here's a different ecosystem, here, here, here. But when all these ecosystems are combined, they create a biome. So back to our definition, a biome is a collection of ecosystems from around the world sharing similar climatic conditions, which are kind of caused by the weather patterns, which tend to correspond to the latitude. I hope that makes sense. So you start looking at your deserts. Here's a desert. Here's a desert. This is the Gobi Desert. And here's a desert out here, kind of the southwest United States and Mexico, okay? Those are all kind of in line. Again, it's because at this little part, there's not a lot of rain, okay? This desert is cold, very cold, okay? This desert is hot. This desert is hot. This desert is hot. So it's not about temperature in a desert. It's about amount of liquid, okay? Okay, so that is what distinguishes a biome, is what climatic conditions are there, okay? So I want to look at one that's actually not on this list, and it's an aquatic ecosystem. And really, aquatic ecosystems are broken into two parts. They're broken into freshwater, and they're broken into marine. Okay, so I shrunk up the world here, and what I want to look at is all the water on the world, okay? And we have so we're going to start with looking at aquatic, okay? And this is where I'm really talking about the structure. And there's a lot of structure around the world. Every one of the things I chose, rainforest, forest, taiga, grassland, desert, tundra, all of them have their own structure, okay? And I don't think we need to know all of them right now, but I want to focus on water and eventually on oceans to show you what I mean by structure. So if we take aquatic and we set this up, something like this, I think this will work, and we bring these up here, we have freshwater and we have marine, okay? Freshwater includes all of your ice that's trapped up here in the Arctic, kind of in this purple part. The tundra it melts, but up above that you have the Arctic Circle that, at least still right now, all stays frozen year-round. Antarctica down at this end, which of course stays frozen year-round, most of it. You have all the rivers of the world, which make up like 1% of all the water in the world, but all the rivers, all the lakes, so the Mississippi, the Amazon, the Nile, the Danube. I have no idea about Australia. Nobody cares about them. But anyway, just kidding, IB, we love you. Australia, good day. All right. All that combined with all these lakes, the Great Lakes, Salt Lake, but all the Great Lakes, Lake Victoria here, all those all combine to make all the freshwater, okay? And they all have their own structure, and we may or may not talk about that. But what I want to focus on is marine. So marine is broken into its own category. Okay, so if we take marine means salt water, okay? And we do have like the Great Salt Lake and stuff, but that's kind of a weird one. We're not going to focus on that. We're going to focus on the other major ones in the world. And so here's the three major places where salt water is found. Coral reefs, which we may have to change this, but coral reefs, okay? Estuaries. Well, I'm not even sure I'm explaining this, so let me stop here. Coral reefs are around islands and around the outside of continents, and they're made of a combination of animal and algae, and we'll come back to that. But they're in fairly shallow, warm water, not hot water, warm water. We'll talk about that in a second. Estuaries are a mix of salt water and fresh water. So probably the most famous version of that is Chesapeake Bay. And it is where, I'm getting old, I can't remember my river. Hang on, I'll look it up. Don't go anywhere. Okay, I found out. There's like 5 major ones, but the one there's James River out east, not our James River. There's the Potomac, There's the Susquehanna. That's always a fun one. Those rivers all feed into this bay, which is where the ocean meets at the Atlantic Ocean, and the two waters mix. And the salt water mixes with the fresh water, and that creates a very specialized ecosystem. And that ecosystem is where only certain animals can live. Some of them only live there long enough to mate, and some of them live there long enough to lay eggs, and some of them live there their whole lives. Some of them live there as infants and larval and then move off. It just varies, but it's a real dynamic ecosystem for that reason. Okay, and then the last one is oceans. And oceans are the big bodies of water, right? Here's the Atlantic, here's the Pacific, here's the Indian, and it goes all around. And of course, the Arctic Ocean. Sorry, I had to pause it. Eileen ran by. We all know how loud she is. Just kidding. Eileen, I'm just kidding. I don't mean it. Or do I? No. Okay, so anyway, here's the oceans. Now, here's what I want to go on further, is I want to talk about, we talk about the oceans of the world. Well, these oceans have their own structure. Okay, and it's like any of this. A forest has its own structure. Okay, the different levels of the trees. A rainforest definitely has its own structure. We can talk about that if we need to. But right now I want to focus on ocean. So here's the first level. It's intertidal. Okay, intertidal is your tide pools. And that's, where you find your starfish, right? The water washes away and there's your starfish on the rocks hanging on going, ah! But this is where there's a lot of change. There's a lot of oxygen in the water because it's constantly being mixed with the water in the air. It's not very deep, so there's a lot of photosynthesis can go on. There's a lot of plankton and bacteria that these guys can eat, so they're really happy. Okay, so that's intertidal, and it's kind of the first level. It's not real deep. The next level we already talked about a little bit, and this is coral reefs. And again, like around Australia, you have the Great Barrier Reef. You have the reef up here in the Caribbean for the United States. Around a lot of islands you have them. Out here in South America you have them. And they're this combination of animal and algae. And the algae does photosynthesis and provides a lot of energy for the animals that live around it, and it's kind of the base of the food chain. But a lot of these microorganisms that maybe feed on little algae, they're eaten by the animal part of coral reef that has tentacles and sends it out and grabs them and pulls them in, eats them, and then they become food for fish, and they become food for octopi, and starfish and so forth. So that's the next level. And this is shallow. It's warm but not hot. If it gets too hot, the microorganisms start to die, and that's called bleaching. And bleaching is bad news for a coral reef. It'll kill a coral reef. And as global warming increases, bleaching increases. And as bleaching increases, our coral reefs start to go away. And that's a major, major ecosystem. Okay, enough of that, I guess. The next level is the pelagic zone. And this is what we think of as the open ocean. When you're out here in the middle of the ocean, or you're out here in the middle of the ocean on a cruise ship or whatever. This is where your whales live. This is where your dolphins live. This is where your tuna and your salmon and a lot of your holy mackerel, all that lives out there. There's a lot of photosynthesis going on with algae that's floating in the water. There are water plants and seaweed out there, some of which is algae, that's all floating around. So there's a lot of plant life. There's a lot of algae. There's a lot of fish and sea creatures. There's a very active, diverse ecosystem. That's pelagic zone, and that's out there. But under the pelagic zone, so this is kind of the next three things I'm going to talk about are dictated by the amount of sunlight. Okay, so and temperature. So the pelagic zone's on top, where there's lots of sun and lots of photosynthesis. The next level, you go down a ways, and is the benthic zone, and this is where here comes Eileen. Okay, sorry, they ran by again. All right, so the benthic zone, now it's cold. It's dark. It's below the pelagic zone. This is where there's not a lot of stuff that lives here. There are some starfish again. There's some of those really weird fish, that glow and kind of are scary. Like this. Ah! Oh my gosh, what the heck is that? Sorry, I'll ease it in this time. Scary fish coming. Okay, so this guy, he has this lure, and he brings other animals into. They look at this light. They're into the light, Carol Ann, and they go and they get scared, and they should, because he eats them. Okay, that's found in the benthic zone, and it's cold down there. There's no real light except for his little beacon, right? But that's a cold, dark place to live. So it's a very different set of abiotic factors. But even below that, even colder, even darker, is the abyssal zone, like the abyss, the abyssal zone. And down here, it's a very interesting thing because there's a lot of pressure. It's very dark. It's very cold, but there's these vents, these deep ocean vents, and they release hydrogen sulfide. Okay, and this hydrogen sulfide actually becomes an energy source for this ecosystem. Where up here on the surface, the energy source is the sun, and everything photosynthesizes. Down here in the abyssal zone, the creatures that live down there on the vents, there's some worms and so forth. There's a lot of bacteria, and this bacteria, it gets its energy from this hydrogen sulfide. And it's a chemosynthesis. Instead of photosynthesis, it's chemosynthesis. And so they turn that hydrogen sulfide into glucose, which is eaten by other organisms. And just like we studied with energy pyramids before, it exists down here in the abyssal zone, except instead of sunlight bringing in the energy, it's the hydrogen sulfide. How frickin' cool is that? I know. It's awesome. Okay, so that's the structure of this particular biome. Of a marine biome, the structure is the intertidal, we look at oceans, and then we look at intertidal part, then we look at coral reefs, then we look at pelagic zone that's out in the open, then below it is the benthic zone, and below that is the abyssal zone. And that kind of structures it out. I hope that helps you understand biomes and biome structure. If not, watch it again, and if that doesn't work, please come ask me questions in class. Okay, ciao.